What's the pettiest chore a manager ever forced you to do at work? A couple of summers ago, I picked up a part-time serving job at a pub right in the middle of town. I already had a full-time job, so this was just something extra to do in the evenings and on weekends. The building had been closed for years after the original owner couldn't keep it going, so when new owners bought it and reopened it, the whole town treated it like a landmark returning. People were excited, and honestly, so was I. I applied as soon as the doors opened and ended up getting hired right away. I was one of the younger servers working with a group of older women who had spent decades in the industry. They took care of us new servers and made sure we didn't get overwhelmed. Most of the team was warm, patient, and funny. The only real headache was the new boss, Gary. Not his real name, but very much his real attitude. Gary had one rule he lived by. If you have time to lean, you have time to clean. If he caught anyone standing still for even a few seconds, he'd immediately send them to do some meaningless chore. If the shift was slow, he'd have us wipe counters that were already spotless or restack menus that were perfectly lined up. He never stopped finding new little tasks to keep us busy. The worst one by far was sweeping the side alley. The alley led to the patio and sat right under two massive maple trees. Early summer meant leaves and those spinning helicopter seeds falling non-stop. On windy days, you could watch them drift down in waves. Sweeping the alley was pointless. You could spend 10 minutes clearing it only to turn around and find an entirely new layer waiting for you. One quiet afternoon in June, Gary told me to go sweep the alley. I grabbed the broom, dustpan, and compost bin and got started. I swept pile after pile, filled the bin, and kept going. But the wind picked up, and more seeds fluttered down. I kept sweeping until one of my coworkers poked her head out to tell me a new table had arrived. She didn't want me missing out on tips, so I headed in to take care of it. I seated the group, took their order, and started entering it into the system when Gary suddenly appeared behind me. "What are you doing?" he asked sharply. "Putting in table 12's order," I said. "The alley looks terrible," he snapped. "I don't pay you to leave things half done." I told him I had swept as much as I could, and that the wind kept blowing everything back down. I even offered to show him the full compost bin. He didn't want to hear any of it. He reassigned the table to Linda, one of the senior servers, and told me to go back out and finish the job. "I want it spotless," he said. Linda pulled me aside and whispered that she'd keep my share of the tips from the table. She had worked in restaurants her whole life and knew exactly when pushing back wasn't worth it. I grabbed the broom again and headed outside. The wind was now steady enough that seeds fell every few minutes. I swept anyway. I cleared one section, and by the time I moved forward, the section behind me was covered again. Inside, the dinner crowd started to arrive. A line formed. The servers were running around trying to keep up, and Linda explained why I wasn't helping. Most of them already knew how Gary operated, so they didn't blame me. I just kept sweeping and sweeping and sweeping. After about 40 minutes, the side door opened and Gary stepped out. His face was red and he looked stressed. "Why aren't you inside helping?" he demanded. I turned and gestured to the alley. Before he could say anything, a strong gust blew through the trees and sent hundreds of seeds spinning through the air. They landed everywhere, on the ground, the steps, and even on his shoes. He stared at them like someone had hit pause on his brain. His tone changed instantly. He told me, much more quietly, to go back inside. I handed him the broom without a word. He took it reluctantly and stepped into the alley while I returned to the dining room. The staff burst into laughter the moment the door closed behind me. I jumped into the dinner rush and made good tips for the rest of the night. Thanks to Linda, I didn't lose out on the table Gary reassigned. After that day, Gary never mentioned the alley again. Suddenly, a few leaves and seeds were fine as long as no one slips. I stayed at the pub until the end of summer, then moved on. Not long after I left, the place changed owners again. Apparently, Gary's management style eventually caught up with him. A few weeks later, I walked by the building and noticed a broken broom sticking out of the dumpster. I didn't ask what happened. I didn't need to.